Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist of Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm joined today by Jim Pietrusznski. He is the CEO of Soulsight, and he has more consonants in his last name than I do in mine. So nice to meet you, Jim.
Nice to meet you, Eric.
So tell me a little bit about what Soulsight does.
So Soulsight, we call ourselves a brand design agency, mainly featuring and working in consumer packaged goods or consumer services.
Yep.
We have a building or headquarters or studio in Chicago, but we have remote workers that work in, now post-COVID all over the country,
right.
Including Hawaii, which is interesting. Our purpose is much how we talk about ourselves is we build emotive brands that move, and that means moving product, moving people, and moving culture. And you're going to ask, how do we do that? So I think that as we talk about the how, it's by really intersecting those human truths with product truths, and that then can help us reveal the subconscious motivating emotion that's driving that consumer or any type of behavior or decision making. So a lot of insight work that goes into that, but then also there's some intuition and empathy that goes into that also. I should say a lot of empathy that goes into that also.
Yeah.
We understand that motivating that piece of emotion, we can make objective decisions that keep brands relevant and evolving and continually growing with culture. So in a nutshell, that's kind of like, what our purpose is and where we focus. But from a functional standpoint, in terms of what we actually put out in the world, is we work in brand innovation, which is developing a new brand, or brand and brand renovation, which would be an existing brand, an iconic brand that needs some help to become more relevant again, or just needs to be livened up, or sometimes brought back to its truths. And then brand activation, which can be a myriad of different touch points, whether it be packaging, whether it be out of home, whether it be shopper, now social and digital. There's many ways in which brands can activate, but at the core, the brand has to have a purpose.
Yeah. I like that. The idea of innovation, renovation, or activation. I haven't heard the renovation one. I love to use home building analogies when you talk about brand, where we are in the process, and that one plays in there. So I may steal it. You may hear me steal it from you.
Welcome to it.
There you go. So yeah, what's interesting is I shared with you as we came into the podcast that we're primarily in the B2B space, and I really think the words B2B and B2C are wrong. They're poorly used. Like B2B means relational, long-term sale, whatever. That's what they mean by that. B2C is transactional. So you still need, and we have things that we fall in love with and we spend a lot of money with it, but it's a quick transaction, right? Like that idea. But in both cases, you're still talking to a person. Like you're trying to motivate them along the way. So as you got it, well, number one, I'm kind of curious about how you got into this space. So like, did you in school were you like, hey, this is the thing I'm going to do? Or no one's ever a direct path, but
yeah, it's not a direct path at all, although somewhat direct. So
okay.
I went to school and I have a degree in graphic design, Bachelor of Fine Arts in graphic design.
Okay.
Started out my very first job working at a packaging agency. I did a lot of work for industrial products, a little bit of food, a smaller agency in Chicago, and was just really interested in the dimensionality of like the package and the form, and then the idea of it, thinking about it being an artifact for our culture. I also like to think about culture and the way that brands define culture today are going to inform those ahead of us. What was going on in our lives, as we live today. So I think that, I worked in, we were doing a lot of package design, less focused on brand specific activations, or brand specific building. It was probably less of the work that we were doing. And then I moved on to a larger agency, global agency, and that really did focus more. It was packaging, but there was more focus on the holistic thinking of a brand. And it was in the infancy days of how we think about brands, more on how do they relate to a purpose? How do they hold together? How do we make sure that at the core, the purpose is, shining through, and that, at your shopper marketing and your package and your communications all are coming from a similar point, and not confusing for whoever the person or target may be. I think that working in such a large agency, and it became a little bit. It was a very busy agency in terms of like churn, and I had an option. One of the women left the agency to start her own business, Ann Warner, and I was one of the first to join the company back in 1997, and really build something from scratch. So we were targeting low to mid-sized companies, but using the same principles and the same altered process because of budgets, but using the same methodology to work on small to mid-sized companies in order to like bring the idea of branding, the idea of empathy, the idea of really thinking about the brand more holistically than a lot of these companies were at the time, and that just continued to build into opportunities for larger and larger brands. So, Molson Coors has been a client of ours for 20 years, which really is not heard of in our industry.
Yeah,
Hershey's been a client of ours for over 10 years, and you talk about the relationship in a brand. And our Soulsight brand relationship is very important to us in terms of forming those relationships and seeing people go from an associate brand manager to CMO. And the time that I've spent with them is rewarding for us too, to be able to see that the impact that we're making for them as a company, but also for the individual as we move forward. As we grew quite, we grew, and then in 2008 and 2009 there was the recession that happened there. So we stayed stable. We kind of stuck it out. And when my business partner Ann retired, we were able to purchase the business from her, and then we took off. We skyrocketed.
Nice.
Things just like almost couldn't keep up with the amount of work and proposals that were coming in at the time, and got exposed to meeting a lot of new people, finding out where we fit and where we don't fit, just by going through that process. And I've held the hats of probably every kind of hat you can wear in an agency, from, as I said, like a designer to an office manager to a creative director, building a strategy department, building an account team. So it really was, a lot of trial and error, but we say like we're a learning organization, so it's okay to make mistakes, like that's how we learn.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what brought us here today.
Yeah, nice. Well, I like the idea of you've really understood your brand ethos as an empathy brand. I mean, you're empathizing with the people you work with, which establishes those relationships over time. It's very similar to Liger. We talk about we don't want to be a partner with a company. We want to become part of their company. So we're on the same side of the table. And you see often, like that's why an agency there's this contentious relationship that will happen inside companies with their agency. And life's too short and the work's too much fun if you do it right. So some different ways to approach it.
Yeah. I was just say one of the things that I think that works well is when you can get a partner that's vulnerable enough to be open and transparent when things are working and when things are maybe not working, and then it's just not the blame game and the pointing the finger game of like, is it the client, or is it our client partner, or is it our agency? And like, how do we make sure that we're, really staying on top of things? And then when something does seem not quite right, or in your gut, you feel like there needs to be another conversation, addressing those things in real time. It's a little bit of psychology for, brand relationships. It's like, being able to like be on top of thinking about, again, that relationship
Yeah.
that can go deeper than just transactional.
Yeah, and we have to tell clients, specifically maybe new to using firms, because we often end up with companies that are our tagline is be known. So we're working with companies who may never have outsourced things before. So now all of a sudden they've got this agency, and they've probably saw something on television about how that works, and they don't want to offend you. And it's like, you can't offend us. People tell our stuff sucks all the time. Like, let's just get it out there, right? The sooner we know where we want to go and where we don't, and if we really feel strong about a thing, we'll let you know. But at the end of the day, you're the customer. Some of this is objective, and we just need to get out there and test it. So it is about establishing that it's okay. We're good. Tell us, what do you like? What do you not like? Especially did you go to like a design school? Was yours?
Actually, I went to a state school with a really strong design program.
Yeah.
So
that's what I love about the people who've been through that, is because you're used to critiques. And so like, when I owned the research company, we would hire designers out of SCAD and Georgia Tech. And I loved them because they could get up, they defended their work. They were fine if you told them that it was terrible, because they'd still tell you why they thought it was great. And, they were not worried about, it wasn't my poor precious project. Like, they knew how to deal with that. So talking about the emotion. So we're going to take our commercial break, and when we come back, I want to get into that a little bit about emotion. So you've got a really interesting stat that ties to one we use when we talk with clients. And so the fact that those two things get multiplied together means what you do is so much more important.
I would say more important. Not more important, equally important.
Equally important. We're going to go to a commercial break. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm talking today with Jim Pietrusznski. He is the CEO of Soulsight. We'll be right back.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger. Liger is a hybrid marketing firm combining a brand strategy consultancy and a production house that offers the full range of content and creative services. We can be your entire marketing department, or your entire marketing department's favorite people to work with. We save the world from boring, broken marketing by putting businesses in brand therapy so they can express their most authentic, memorable selves. And then we share their story so they can be known. For more information, visit ligerpartners.com and follow us on our social media platforms.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm talking today with Jim Pietrusznski. He is the CEO of Soulsight. And we're having this important conversation about that brand part of, we in Ligerland talk about BACCOM. So it's branding, awareness, traffic, conversion, optimization, and maintenance. You can't skip a step, so you got to make sure you got a good brand. One of the stats that Jim shared over to me is, he said that, did you know that over 70% of our purchase decisions are made emotionally? So 70% of our purchase decisions are made emotionally. And we know that 70 to 80% of the B2B decision is made before the person picks up the phone and calls you. So it's being made emotionally, and you take those two numbers and look at it, what that brand is saying, how it's doing it, all those types of things is incredibly important. So talk to me about, Jim, kind of your approach. Like, how do you know somebody's doing it well, not doing it well? What do you do first? Is it an innovation or renovation? It's kind of give me that thought if I came to you with something.
Yeah. So I think that emotional reason to believe in terms of like when we set out on a project and a brief is up typically in a brief and is very subjective based on, a marketer's opinion or where things are driving, but rarely do we know if that emotional reason to believe is actually resonating with our target. So, we go through the subjective process often, using empathy, trying to understand, are we pulling out the emotion and the right archetype to build on a brand? But, a lot of what when we talk about emotion and choice of purchasing projects or, purchasing services, it's also subconscious. That emotion is subconscious. So like, even though we might not be viscerally feeling the emotion, there's an emotion there. We're just not subconsciously not able to articulate what that is. So one of the models that we've been working on for, I want to say 15 years, is trying to develop some form of quantitative study that we could take to the CMO or, the VP and have them understand, we're talking about the brand with an emotion, reason to believe in one space. Can we really validate that in order to gauge what those consumer emotional connections might be with our products and brands? I think one of the things that's been interesting is like what we're looking at really is like brand affinity and brand loyalty, and through a series of questions, be able to dig into. And again, I'm not the statistician part of how this works is over my head, but so we're test driving a couple things right now, and really just to help us explain the variance beyond brand attitudes and brand loyalty, but explain it, like help us explain it through what that emotion might be. It's a step closer to understanding that emotion.
So Jim, one of the things that you always hear from the CMO or the financial person is, well, how do I measure this? Like, how do I know that the work that you're doing for me and where my brand is, like, what are those kind of things? What do you guys do to answer that question?
Interesting question. I think that it's been relevant for us right now. We're working on test driving a quantitative process to better understand that connection and variance beyond brand attitudes, but brand loyalty and brand satisfaction and how that relates to emotion. So working with a team of psychologists and a professor from the University of Illinois, who really studies deep into emotion to help pull together a quantitative survey that will allow us to dig in to gauge those emotional connections with brands that evaluate both the surge of emotional affinity and from understanding and how they exist, and can be applied to any of the things we talked about earlier: brand innovation, brand renovation, brand activation. I think the name of the process has moved, so it's
nice.
Motivating opportunity via emotion. So it has like an acronym that we use, and really it's, again, as I said, it's really a measurement to like gut check ourselves, and then gut check the subjectivity that goes into how we think about things emotionally resonating with a specific target audience or individual.
Very nice. And so one thing that I'm curious about that I'd like to have you kind of speak into is we tend to work with companies that are up and coming. So they're not a well-known company. And the importance of establishing that brand and then repetitiveness or, creating some kind of connection. So I'm always preaching it because it's like big companies, Target, Publix, Apple, Old Navy all use some version of white, and you can tell what commercial you're about to see just by the shade of white that comes up on the screen. So that repetitiveness and the importance from an emotional perspective, or from like people remembering, what do you guys do? How do you help companies to adhere to what does that brand feel like and what does it look like?
Well, when it's a startup or when it's something that's new to the world, I think it's important to not cut corners to get things to market fast. I think the value sometime of taking just the time to invest in creating a brand purpose, creating a brand identity, creating a brand standards that, you can, obviously it needs to evolve as product evolves, but really owning something and really owning a point of difference and not just showing up to compete with everything else that's on shelf. I think there's a lot to choose from, but the most authentic that we can be to what the brand means and to the need it serves helps the brand hold together. And by we often do tabletop discussions where we bring cross-functional agencies together, whether it be the media agency, their digital agency, the PR agency, and we talk about what does it mean for how this needs to be activated, or how does this, when we're renovating something, what are we actually renovating? The process is pretty similar in terms of like whether it's small or big. I think the level of risk, I think, is different depending on if you're talking small or big. If you're a lot of these smaller, whether they're private equity backed or they're mom and pop companies that are trying to build a new brand, or it's a brand that just needs, they did consider brand when they launched, and now they're finding out, we don't know we don't know why, we don't really know who we are.
Yeah.
And there is testing and there's insights that we can do to help brands find out who they are. And one of those things that we do is called the RISE process. So we're really looking at what do we retain if something exists from the brand? What do we need to introduce? Like, are there things that the brand needs that we don't currently have? What needs to be strengthened? You talk about the level of white. Like, Target knows that there are standards to, like, that white is a strength of theirs that they need to leverage. And then ultimately, like, other things that need to be eliminated that are creating noise or getting in the way or taking us into, like, stunt marketing that's not really serving purpose of the brand at the center.
Nice. I like that. You've got a lot of little things that you could use that could turn into exercises for people to consider as they think about it. And, companies so often want to jump forward to deliverables and work and all that. And if you don't establish this, you so often go back to just fixing it. Like, we should have just started here, because you need to go slow so you can move really quick. Like if you can go slow at the beginning, you can be much quicker later.
It's hard, I think, when you're a smaller brand, to understand the value of the budget of your budget, and how important it is to get the brand right. So that when people are seeing it for the first time, it starts that level of engagement. It starts that level of emotional or brand loyalty that needs to exist. And sometimes that can be done functionally, but I think that's lightning in a bottle. I think all of a sudden something takes off because of a trend. But we can shepherd a brand to be successful if we go through the right benchmarks, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, we're always amazed with we've got companies that their brand is so tight and we can do just a ton of work for them in any given month. And the ones that aren't, there's always this, it's subjective. No one knows what the rule is. Like, it's so, and the companies that have done the right things on the brand side, they spent a lot of money at the beginning, but now they're spending less for the things on the outside, and that those are, you know it before you see the company, like that's their brand just based on how it's been done. So, that's not a place to cut corners. You don't want to cut corners on that foundation. So, in our last few minutes, if you could wave a magic wand in this space, so if there was something you could wave a magic wand on, you could redo some company's brand because you just wish you could touch it. You could tell every company out there that they really should be doing this thing, or a mistake you see people commonly make. What would be Jim's advice to people around this category?
I'd love to wave a magic wand to help, cross-functional categories or different channels to understand that just because, we may not have had experience as an agency, we might not have a ton of experience in, say, I'll just use cosmetics as an example. The same principles apply no matter if you're talking about eggs, if you're talking about milk, if you're talking about cheese, I guess those are all dairy, but the same principles to apply to how we think about branding. I'd like to say, we've almost touched in grocery, in CPG, we've probably touched a product in almost every single aisle of the grocery store. Yeah. So it's about learning about who that person is, less about the category cues and the category codes are easy to pick up. It's understanding the whole person and being empathetic to the whole person that makes, that makes it important. That's really important, needs to lie. I think sometimes we'll be in a capabilities and, if you don't win an RFP pitch, you'll hear, well, the other company had experience in the category. We really wanted to work with you guys, but, there was a risk because you don't, you haven't worked on pet care. So, I think that getting beyond that barrier of experience, the only way we're going to really learn, and actually something that you can learn something from a cross category, bring it to your category and change the game. So there is benefit to not having a lot of experience in certain categories to be able to bring new thinking and learnings from other places, where you've done work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We still see it today, but in the research space in particular, they'd be like, do you have experience in our industry? And I'm like, we may or may not in your industry, but we have experience with your problem. I have seen your problem before.
Perfect. Yeah.
And so I know how to then address that problem. And then people talk about like wanting best practices or whatever. That just means you want to be middle of the road. Like you want to be like everyone else. And marketing's got to be visceral. Make me cry, make me hate it, make me love it, make me something, but make me pay attention. So how do I think about that and specifically starting with brand? Like that's great. Well, it's been fun talking with you. How do people best get in touch with you? What's your favorite?
I would say go to our website, soulsight.com.
Okay.
There's a little info button there. We're always looking for great talent. So, whether you're a creative or an account service person, strategist, we're always willing to talk to any individual, whether we're about to hire someone or in need to hire someone, but like to continue to build that network up because, and now that remote work is possible, you don't have to live in Chicago to work with us.
Yeah, I found it funny you were talking about you had people in Hawaii. Ours all seem to want to be in Canada. So we have a lot of people up in cold Canada. If I made a choice, I'd pick Hawaii or somewhere warm. So it's been a great conversation. We'll put all the information in our show notes to get to you and those types of things. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Eric.
So you've been listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist of Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I've been talking today with Jim Pietrusznski. He is the CEO of Soulsight on that most important part of what we call backcomm. So branding, awareness, traffic, conversion, optimization, and maintenance. In order to be known, you have to have a good brand. You have to start off there. So what is that brand? Is it recognizable? Do people remember it? And would they feel like that they should be your customer? So have you established that right type of empathy? Until next time, thanks for tuning in.